Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here, and I have to tell you, it's not easy following such a tremendous set of presentations, including the one given by Michael and the one just given by Liza. And I was thinking to myself, what do you do? What do you do to follow? And then the answer came to me: breakdancing. Breakdancing is what I'm going to do. How many people would like to see me breakdance? Just for I see, great. I have bad news for you. I don't know how to breakdance. But it's nice to actually see how many people would be interested in seeing me embarrass myself in front of you all here. But we're here today to talk about RFID, and it's a subject that, of course, is clearly near and dear to me, but hopefully 40 minutes from now it may be near and dear to you as well. So let me tell you a bit about what I'm hoping to accomplish with this discussion here today. I want to tell you a little bit about what this is. Some of you may have some familiarity. How many people here, just by show of hands, truly know nothing about RFID? Like, maybe have never even heard about it before. Okay, well, that's a lot. That's a lot. But for the people who already have heard about RFID, what I'd like to do is move the ball forward, help you understand why it's relevant to you and your companies, and why booksellers and publishers and wholesalers, why people in these businesses, your businesses, some of you really ought to be getting off your butts and starting to take advantage of the opportunities that the technology presents for you. What I'm going to do is tell you not only about what's happening in the publishing industry, but I'm also going to tell you about what's happening outside the publishing industry, giving examples of industries like apparel and footwear, where RFID is already seeing great traction. So let's get into it. I want to tell you about the distinction between item-level RFID and carton-level RFID. Item-level RFID is what occurs when you actually take one of these smart labels or smart stickers, and I'll tell you more about that in a second, but actually attach it to a physical item, in this case a book, or it could be a DVD, a CD, game, whatever. Carton-level RFID is the phenomenon that occurs when you just attach a smart label to a carton, but you're not tagging anything inside the carton. So you're just tracking and tracing the carton itself. We're not talking about that today. We're talking about item-level RFID. The focus today will be really on the commercial issues. I'm going to have to tell you a bit about the technology itself, just as a means of level setting, but really it's about the business proposition here and why you should care about it. And then finally, well, like I said, I have a lot of passion for RFID, and I think there are good reasons why your companies should begin using it as well. Really, I'm not trying today to do an RFID infomercial, but like I said, there's a lot to get excited about. So this is what I call the ABCs of RFID, and arguably everything you need to know about RFID is actually written on this one slide. So let's go through it quickly. Like I mentioned before, you have tags, and I'll show you a picture of that shortly. You have readers that read the tags using radio waves, and then you have software that interprets that information. These tags are serialized, meaning that every item, in this case every book, has its own unique license plate number. So if you have 10 books in a pile, same ISBN number, they each have their own serialized license plate number. You have rapid reading, meaning that you can take inventory of a whole shelf of books very quickly, and I'll show you some pictures soon of the devices that do that, or you can actually have shelves that take their own inventory, what we call a smart shelf, and they're out there now. I mean, this isn't, sci-fi stuff, it's stuff being used today. And you have other ways of reading where you can actually install certain antennas and basically create a 3D grid of exactly what is sitting within the four walls of your store or the four walls of your warehouse, and you can see exactly what you have and where it's sitting. Now, obviously, price points come into play, and that has a bearing on what type of solution you'd use, but that's what's happening, and this is where it's going. In terms of the formats of the tags, as it relates to your industry, really there are two formats that are relevant, and I have a prop with me today. Two types. The first is a concealed inlay. You'll see what I have here is a book that has an RFID inlay right there. It's maybe 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters. The other thing here is just a standard EAS anti-theft tag. That's the older technology. We kind of call it the cheap beep. Something goes out the front door, you don't know what's gone out the front door, but you've heard a beep, so you know somebody hasn't paid for something. This particular printer has actually created one that has both, but I don't want you to think that RFID requires this to be there, because it actually doesn't. And as a matter of fact, RFID, among its many uses, is being looked at by some as a replacement so that you won't need the older technology at all. But right now we're actually in an environment where having both isn't a bad thing, and I'll get to that a little more as well. So I mentioned tags, and I just showed you what we call an RFID inlay. That's this little white 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters. And what you have is a little microchip. And let me just use the pointer right here. You've got a microchip right there. And on that chip is where you would have the encoded information. Now, you can create a serialized GTIN and a specialized tag identifier. I can tell you right now that the International ISBN Agency is in discussions with a group called EPC Global about creating truly a global standard for what this numbering schema will be. But it's very doable, and actually all it's really about in those discussions is about ISBN making sure that it gets paid its fair share for the fact that its numbering scheme is going to be used. So this is where the chip resides. Everything around it, all this copper part here, is an antenna. And then the chip and antenna get put on a sticky piece of paper or substrate, and that's called an inlay. And then you can take that inlay, you can embed it the way it was embedded in the book I just showed you, or you can put it sandwiched right into a sticker, and you can slap that sticker onto the back of a book, inside the cover, onto any page. You can do it that way as well. So that's an inlay. Then you have the readers themselves. And what you see here is really the family of readers. And what I like about this picture is that it actually allows me to show you a bit about the evolution of this reading technology. I'll start with the mobile handheld readers. And I'm going to start with this one on the right over here. This is a ruggedized handheld reader. It looks just like the barcode scanning guns that many of you are familiar with. And this has been the predominant reader for the past, I'd say, 4 to 5 years. Even in retail applications, retail stores, including many clothing stores that have been busy using this, they've been using this reader here. It's a rugged reader. It's, in my opinion, more at home, and it looks like it belongs in a warehouse, not in a store, but it's effective and it's rugged. Over the last 12 months, you've had new developments, including this reader developed by the same company. It's, as you can see, it's smaller, it's lighter, has a slightly different antenna. It's actually a little more ergonomic. It's cheaper as well, and it actually is a little more powerful and effective. And this is something that looks more appropriate in the 4 walls of a retail store, and you're seeing this being used much more often. Then you have, so those are the 2 mobile handheld readers, this one and that one. This is a mobile reader that you might attach to a cart. It doesn't need to actually be mounted or plugged into anything. And then you have the 2, this one up here and this one over here, that do need to be mounted. Now, what you would do is you would mount it either at a doorway, whether it's a dock door, or let's say the doorway in a store between the stock room and the selling floor, or you would have this at checkout where you'd have one of these readers, and then you would connect a few antennas at each of the registers. It isn't just the reader itself. You actually attach a few antennas. So you'll see here that those are the ports where you would actually attach a cable. But what's interesting is up until the past 9 months, this was really the type of reader that you would use even in a store. And what has happened is that the same manufacturer as well as others have commercialized products that are much smaller. So this is something that basically is the size of a router that you'd have at home. And once again, it looks much more at home within the 4 walls of a retail store. Even though there's nothing wrong with that, it works perfectly fine too, and that's what you'd want to use in a warehouse. I don't mean to really bore you with too much information about the stuff, the gear. I don't sell the stuff, and that's not really the exciting part. The exciting part is why you would care about this and why you would want to use it. I'll take you a little bit into what's happening in apparel, because I want to give you truly an appreciation for the fact that this is being used more broadly. In apparel and footwear, you have 4 main types of tags. You have the paper ticket that looks just like a paper price tag where you can see the inlay sandwiched inside. You have the adhesive label like the one you would slap on a book, just like that, just like a regular sticker with a little chip inside. You have sewn in labels that basically are garment care labels where you have that inlay embedded into it with instructions for the customer to just take a pair of scissors and snip it off once you get home. And then you have the hard tag that looks just like the anti-theft tag. Let's say you're shopping at the Bay, for example, and you're all familiar with that. So this just has that other technology inside of it. Those are the tags. I've already shown you what a book looks like with RFID embedded inside. I mentioned the other way, the sticker that you just attach that way, or you can put it on the inside cover or anywhere else. Now, inline tagging, this is pretty exciting because a lot of people have wondered, well, okay, many people have thought that, all right, it's going to start with these smart stickers, and then one day we're going to see this actually used by the printers and put into books, but we're already there. So you may be wondering, how much do these tags cost? What I'm told, and I spoke to the provider last week, I'm told it's roughly 11 cents each based on volumes of 500,000. Obviously, more volume, lower price, you know how that goes. Now, what's interesting, and I can give you an example from the world of apparel and footwear, is that these disposable smart labels that cost about 11 cents are being used right now on garments that sell for as little as $5. People used to think, well, this only makes sense if something costs $20 or more, for me to do this, for us to justify it. But we've known all along. So as little as $5. And it's interesting what Michael Tamblin said earlier today about the average price of a book at checkout being $14. So if you're asking yourself, does this have relevance to your industry? I would say those are two data points that should tell you that the answer is absolutely yes. Some of you may be wondering, how quickly can these be put into books? Does this really slow things down? The short answer is no. In this case, you're looking at an application speed of about 100 books per minute, and that includes the encoding as well. So anyways, enough about the technology itself. Truly, it's the part that I enjoy least when I talk about RFID. I prefer much more to talk about the business value it creates. So let's start first with retailers, but we'll talk as well about the benefits to publishers as well. Benefit to book retailers, very clearly, inventory accuracy. And it's not just how much you have in the store, but where it is within the store. Because unlike a clothing store where you might have a pile of red sweaters and a pile of blue sweaters, and if one of the blue sweaters gets put in the pile of red sweaters, it's easy to see that something isn't where it belongs. In a bookstore, as you know, books travel, books wander, and it takes a lot of effort and energy to try to find them and to try to correct that problem. It's a constant challenge, and even with the best of intentions and a lot of labor hours thrown at the problem, you never really get back to where you want to be. Now, this is a technology that helps solve that problem. You have the ability to reduce inventory counts, in fact, eliminate them completely. So it's not just about the efficiency of doing counts of specific zones within your store, but so on a day in, day out, week in, week out basis, you're doing that with fewer labor hours, but you also can do away with the annual or semi-annual full manual inventory audit of the whole store, and that's something that's exciting as well. I'm not going to suggest to you that that is the key benefit, but that's icing on the cake, and every dollar counts. Employee productivity. I told you a bit about being able to spot strays, and so, for example, using one of those handheld reader guns where you can actually wand a shelf and actually have the system identify which books are on that shelf that don't belong on the shelf. There's another bit of functionality as well, which is locator functionality. So let's say I'm looking for a particular title. It's not where it's supposed to be, but I can have the associate actually begin to look for it. And I actually want to read you directly from the spec sheet of the manufacturer that has this functionality on their handheld. Others do too. This is what they say. A unique combination of intuitive audible and visual cues quickly and easily guides workers to the desired item. As the device moves closer to a specific item, a beep tone increases in frequency and volume, while a sliding graphical bar increases in size. So basically, this is allowing you to find the proverbial needle in the haystack. Pretty exciting stuff. What this really is all about is on-shelf availability and higher conversion rates. This isn't, I wouldn't say this is primarily about operating your stores with fewer dollars and hours devoted to labor, although that frankly is a big part of the business case. But this is about on-shelf availability. This is a top-line growth story, and a very real one. And many of you know, I mean, listen, you know your world better than I know your world. You know the impact of improved on-shelf availability on conversion rates, and that's ultimately what this is about. Other benefits for retailers. I've mentioned eliminating physical audits, expedited checkout. So just like at a library where you place all the books down on a counter and they get rung up. Now, booksellers here, you can assess for yourself what value that is to you. But I've spoken to retailers who tell me that, yeah, shaving 10 seconds off of every transaction, yeah, that would be important to us. And I've taken people to a bookstore in Europe, a book superstore that had that ability, where they just placed it down. In fact, they had a screen showing the customer exactly what they had just placed down on the counter, and they could see their purchase being rung up. And then you have customer-facing applications. Many bookstores now have kiosks. What this can do is actually trigger that interaction with the customer. So if I were to hold this book within proximity of that kiosk, suddenly, without me needing to scan a barcode to let the kiosk know what I have in front of it, basically the kiosk would have a little antenna. So if I held it, let's say, within 12 inches in proximity, it could fire up content specific to that. Readers who like this title, or here's more about the author, or here's what others are saying. So, you know, once again, is that a big thing? You can judge for yourself. I think that that's icing on the cake, but you might have a different view. I like this slide. It's not intended that you're going to be able to read this slide. It's an eye chart, and it's actually even an eye chart for me, but I have a copy here so I can actually read it to you. The whole point of this chart is that there are lots of boxes and lots of arrows that go back and forth. These are the many touches of a printed book, and of course we start up here with the printer, goes to the publisher warehouse, then goes to the online retailer's warehouse or the bookstore chain's warehouse, and then finds its way to the consumer, either directly from the online retailer or through the chain bookstores themselves, or maybe the book went through a wholesaler and then to an independent bookseller and found the new book customer that way. And then, of course, you have the used market, online and otherwise. And like I said, lots of arrows going both ways. And that's the amazing thing. When you think about the world of apparel and footwear and fashion, and a fair amount of my time is spent serving companies in that industry as well, you're dealing with product there that doesn't go back and forth the way that product does in your industry. So it's amazing because you have the ability to move and identify product much more effectively and much more efficiently than has been done in the past. And to me, that's very exciting. So I want to tell you quickly about 3 companies who are using RFID effectively today. They aren't the only 3, that's for sure, but I think these are 3 great examples. The first is John Wiley & Sons in their higher ed division. Now, initially, this started out as a trial, or what we call a pilot project, but based on information I obtained last week, I'm told that this truly is a rollout. It's not a pilot anymore, and this is already deployed in 4 countries, in the US, the UK, and Singapore, and that they've already tagged over 800,000 books. With softcover books, they're using a sticker, like I showed you before. With hardcover books, they're putting it under the end paper of the cover, just like the book I showed you as well. Now, this is the reason why John Wiley & Sons is doing this. This is really about product authentication. This is about return fraud, and this is about theft deterrence. So detecting counterfeit copies, you know that this is a big issue for many of you. With returns fraud, I'll give you an example. Let's say a bookseller in Singapore orders 100 copies at first, not a huge order, but then ends up buying a bunch more from a local dealer at a deeply discounted price, but then wants to return some of those books it purchased at a discount, but get full credit for those books. Right now, things like that slip through the cracks all the time, and this is something that John Wiley and Sons, and I'm sure other publishers too, this is something that they clearly would like to get control of. Now, there might be rules in place in certain contracts that it isn't even a matter of ensuring that someone only gets 50 cents on the dollar, not 100 cents on the dollar, but in certain cases the commercial terms are such that books sold overseas can't be returned for anything, and if that's the case, the publisher will have the ability to identify that and ensure that nothing gets paid out at all. Another issue is the complimentary evaluation copies that get distributed to professors who evaluate the book and decide whether or not they want to use it for the course. Often what happens is professors return it to the bookstore, and then they try to return it for credit, and in many instances you have credits being paid out for books where no credit at all is supposed to be issued. So that's an issue that of course they want to get on top of. And then there's theft detection and prevention. What I can tell you from the world of apparel and footwear is that the moment that retailers start using this in their stores to take inventory once or twice or more per week, what they're finding is that their rate of shrink is going down fairly significantly and almost instantly. And basically what's happening there is it's theft by employees that is being eliminated almost right off the bat, because basically the employees know that the employer has a much better way now of knowing what was in the store, where it was, who was working. Plus you have the ability to tie this in with closed circuit TV and other loss prevention digital technologies, so that you can now timestamp and you're looking at something specifically, and you have the ability to trace how crime was being perpetrated and by who, and that deterrent benefit is very real, and it's being achieved right now. And then of course you have just the sheer raw labor efficiencies. I haven't really talked much about that so far, but you have the ability with RFID to read rapidly, and you can read inside a box without the need to open a box. So for example, I was speaking to a solution provider assisting another publisher, and they have books that are about 1.5 inches thick, and they have 24 books in a carton, and they can pass that carton through a doorway, just any old doorway, a dock door that has one of these readers and antennas, and the radio waves can penetrate the box and read all of the items in the box. And the limit isn't 24. In another instance, you know, I've been told 300 books in a carton, and that's being read as well. So to me, I find that very significant. I imagine to many of you it would be as well. The Thomas Nelson RFID project. Thomas Nelson is a publisher based in the US that publishes primarily religious books. They've completed a pilot. I'm told that they're committed to moving forward. Are they going at the same speed as John Wiley and Sons? Can't say that. They could be somewhere close to that, but I don't have that confirmation. But I'm told they're very, very interested in this. They're using inline tagging inside the spine of a book. This was the example that I showed you before. And I'm told what makes this interesting is that this process withstands the hot melt. Some of you may know what that is. To me, it sounds like a burger at Burger King. But anyways, that was really the excitement for them about creating this patented process. Once again, this is about detecting counterfeit. This is about eliminating fraudulent returns. This is giving them visibility into where their product is. And that's the exciting thing too. You have opportunities to leverage this granular information about the movement and flow of product, even things like dwell time, even things like being able to say to your trading partner, yeah, we shipped this to you, and oh, by the way, it's still sitting in your back room, you don't even have it out on the shelf. You know, these are things that other retailers and their trading partners are finding relevant. In your world, I don't know to what extent it will be, because I know that many bookstores have relatively small back rooms compared to other types of retailers. And this is about expediting product flow as well. And then with Thomas Nelson, one of the big wins is reducing theft. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but I'm told that the book that gets stolen most frequently in bookstores is actually the Bible, believe it or not. I don't know how many of you find that surprising, but it's the Bible. I've always thought it would be really, really interesting, or well, funny, to actually have a little sign in the religious book section with one of the anti-theft companies like Sensormatic or Checkpoint, but just would say, like, what would Jesus do? And with a question mark and then their logo. But I don't know if they'd go for that. So that's the Thomas Nelson project, and that's moving forward. And then this is a bookseller chain based in Holland. Think of this as the Dutch Indigo. And this is a retailer who's been using RFID. They started, I think, back in 2007, 2008. They have revenue of about $250 million. They receive about 8 million books a year, big volume, and they also have a bunch of college bookstores as well. So you've got, the high-end, high-ticket books with all of those commercial issues I just spoke about, but then you have all of the traditional bookstore issues that an Indigo or a Barnes & Noble has. And they're using RFID in several superstores. And it's not just one or two categories. We're talking every book in the store has a smart label either attached or inside. And this is tagging that's being performed by the wholesaler, the same way that an Indigo, and hey, listen, if there's anyone here from Indigo, maybe you have a different view, but Indigo, for the time being, before we get into an environment where these are being put into the books themselves, embedded, and for that interim period of time, Indigo, I believe in its own warehouse, can be applying one of these smart stickers on for inventory management purposes. And that's basically what's happening here in Holland, using those adhesive labels. And well, I'm just going to wait a second here. I'll show you a picture of the bookstore before going back to that other slide. You can see for yourself beautiful bookstores. This one actually has more of a loft feeling to it, but they truly are Holland's version of Indigo. And for them, this is about on-shelf availability, like I said. This is about expedited checkout. This is something that clearly is of interest to them. This is about efficiently receiving new shipments in minutes, not hours, and this is about reducing theft. So some of you may be saying to yourself, okay, well, this sounds good, but publishers, the major publishers need to get on board, and the major booksellers need to give some signals that they care more about this. And this sounds great in theory, but we can't really tap into these benefits today. And this is going to be 5 years from now, not 5 months from now. So why should I really care? So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the conversations that are taking place and have been taking place for more than a couple of years already. And they're picking up in terms of intensity, in terms of frequency, and you have leaders like John Wiley and Sons who are making it known that, yes, this really needs to be a standards-based approach, and we're willing to talk, we're willing to share, but we don't want to do this as a one-off. We want to do this as part of a standards-based environment. So you have the ISBN agency, like I mentioned, with organizations like Editeur and EPC Global, which is part of a family all under the umbrella of GS1. It's the same organization that administers the barcode globally. And you have discussions taking place between these associations. And like I said before, this is ultimately all about money. And frankly, I believe it's about ensuring that ISBN gets paid its fair share for the ISBN number. Then you have BISG, many of you are familiar with, and they have the Manufacturing Executive Interest Group and the Distribution Executive Interest Group, and my friend Jim Lichtenberg plays a very active role helping lead discussion around technology-related issues. And so this has been on the agenda. In fact, BISG invited me to one of their meetings last June. And I know that Noah is intimately involved. I believe he sits on the board of BISG. You also have the Book Manufacturers Institute that has had this on the agenda on some of their meetings and are increasingly interested. And it is developments like this that make this more of a reality for them. And they recognize that this is something that truly is here today. It's not 5 years from now. You have the Association of American Publishers. You have the American Booksellers Association. So, you know, when I look at this, I say, look who's talking. And you have all of the organizations that you would expect to be involved and the appropriate publishers now beginning to bring people to the table to have these important discussions. So like I said earlier, I see tremendous opportunity here. This is something that your companies could already be capitalizing on. I'd encourage you to give it a closer look, and when you get back to the office, to talk to some of your colleagues who you think ought to know about this as well. My name is Marshall Kay, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Just ask me your question. I'll let you know if we have time to answer it. Yeah, there is an additional serialized number that goes along with it. Right now, what people like John Wiley and Sons and Thomas Nelson and others are doing is using a serialized G tin, something called an SG tin, that's called a UID, and then a TID, which is a special code that can't be cloned, can't be tampered or altered with, and it's the combination of the two. Now, with EPC Global, in their discussion with the ISBN agency, it's essentially a combination, similarly, a serialized, non-clonable number that, that would be associated with the book. Primarily, and that's why I've actually spent so much time talking about apparel and fashion and footwear. And by the way, there are other industries that are taking advantage of RFID. I don't want you to think that it's just books and clothing, because that's certainly not the case. But the reason I decided to tell you so much about it is because I don't want you to think that, oh, this sounds neat in theory, but you know, this is a book industry thing and it's going to take us a while to get this off the ground. You guys are a small part of this. You know, as a matter of fact, you know, I deal with technology companies all the time, and right now there is an active market, especially in apparel and footwear and fashion, where they're having a hard time keeping up with demand. So, you know, if you may be wondering, how excited will they be about working and hand-holding to, you know, to get some volume out of the publishing industry? Listen, I'm sure they would say that, yes, of course, we want to help everybody, but you may find yourself sometimes taking a back seat to some bigger and larger orders that are already coming out of other sectors. But listen, ultimately, this is going to happen across all sectors, and I don't want you to think that right now that there isn't the capacity to help your companies get forward right now. But think about it, John Wiley and Sons, they're going to be using this in all of their their higher ed textbooks. That's a significant volume. I mean, if the other publishers of higher ed textbooks were to make a similar decision, and then college bookstores around the country and around the world started using this, you can see this traction. But you know, you step back, you look at it. Does it make sense that you're seeing more of it with books that sell for $75 rather than $7.50? Yeah. But if you're someone who has books that sell, you know, for $10, $15, yes, this is relevant to you too. Truly, I can't give you a good answer. Well, actually, you know what? I take that back. I'm sorry. I might be able to give you a good answer, and it's based on pricing that's quoted for pilot projects, not related to publishing, but the product being supplied, the tag and the inlay are basically the same. Pilot projects usually have a cost of about 20 cents. But if it's if this is in production and it's go forward, you're looking at something in between that range. Maybe 18 cents, 19 cents. Oh, you could break it up as many ways as you want. Yeah, it's just the volume. I actually have a question for the group. Well, I'm interested just in the composition of the audience. How many people here are booksellers? Please raise your hand, okay. How many are publishers? Okay, good. Any wholesalers? Always a couple, always a couple. Anyways, that was helpful. Any other questions? The industry is basically rolling over that. They have. I mean, think about it in terms of your ability to authenticate a return. You lose that, and so yeah. So the industry has moved past that, and you know, even in the world of apparel, you can see that you have this being put into garment care labels now, and you know, for the first few years that wasn't being done. So for the same reason. Well, the folks at Motorola probably wouldn't like me saying this, but no. They have their list price, but once again, it always depends on volume. You're looking at under $3,000 per reader. The list price is more. I think the list price on that smaller, lighter one, I think it lists for about $3,400, but the street price in volume, under $3,000, and frankly, based on high volume, you could probably get it closer to $2,000. Anything else? Well, I want to tell you, I have a couple more of these. I can't give this to anybody, but I've got 3 of these, so afterwards, if anyone wants to just come find me, I can show you what these look like, and I thank you for your time. Nice to be here with you.